And we are back. Christopher, you talked about the civil war in Islam. Talk about the role of religion, as you see it, in the conflict we are now involved with.
Well, people attack the president for all kinds of things that he said or appeared to say about religion, but and some of which have been rather ill-considered, including the statement that Islam is a religion of peace, which I would say was a statement that was non-true rather than untrue. The Christian churches, almost in their entirety, I believe, were opposed to the regime change in Iraq. So was the President's own church, the United Methodist Church, for example. It was very interesting to me to find how completely useless Christianity was in a struggle of this kind. It was awful to find that Christianity was a religion of peace, or at least of pacifism and of surrender. The Church, as far as I know, has not endorsed any war as just since it supported General Franco's invasion of Spain to destroy the Spanish Republic with a Muslim mercenary army in the 30s on the side of Hitler. I think this is a wonderful occasion to discuss what the real value of religion in politics, international affairs, is. The difficulty for me is that while we are, in a sense, objectively committed to secularism for our own society and in others, if you take, say, just the case of Palestine, American support has, and Israel, American support has up till now gone to a Wahhabi royal family that pumps out anti-Semitic propaganda and anti-American propaganda, but was considered our ally in the Middle East, to Israeli settlements which were run by messianic fanatics who wouldn't be able to do this if it wasn't for American aid, and to extreme Christians, mainly in the United States, who hope that out of this conflict they can bring on Armageddon and the apocalypse. So what is otherwise a perfectly soluble problem, division of Palestine between its Arab and Jewish inhabitants, is made impossible by monotheism.
No, it's made impossible.
Completely poisoned by it.
Well, that it may be poisoned by the fusion of monotheism with politics, and that's the issue. The issue is not the relevance of faith. The issue is the fusion of faith with political power, and this is something that...
Well, if you believe as Jesus coming back very soon is going to kill everyone who doesn't agree with him, how do you keep that out of politics?
Well, I think you have to develop...
The belief is political. I'm sorry, Andrew.
No, it's not. Belief can't... It is possible, and if you believe John Locke, I mean, maybe you don't, but it is possible and should be possible, in fact essential, given our human experience. Christianity is not innocent in this regard. The 16th and 17th centuries were religious wars. People were murdered in large numbers, and out of that experience, that some things you may believe in are still not so important they're worth killing other people for, came liberal democracy. Our very system of government came out of resistance to the power of religion in politics.
Absolutely.
And what we're fighting for in this war, and I wrote this just at the very beginning of this war, is the possibility of religion outside of politics. And when you read the Gospels, I think that the overwhelming message is exactly that. My kingdom is not of this world, our Lord said. And there is a distinction between what Caesar is and what I am. And the idea, I mean, I think that the idea that Muslims could create a warrior theology out of Islam is much less amazing than that Christianity might do such a thing. And I also believe that that kind of fundamentalism and zeal, in which you think your truth is so important, you should kill another person to save his soul, is as dangerous in this country as it is anywhere else. It's not gotten to the same lengths, but I see the same glint in the eye of someone like Jimmy Swaggart or Pat Robertson and some of the forces that this president is riding to victory on. And I worry, I do not want this to become a war between fundamentalist Christianity and fundamentalist Islam. It is a war between fundamentalist religion and liberal democracy. And I say that as a believing Catholic.
Well, it's a civil war also within the other monotheisms, and after all, more than half of American Jews and more than half of Israeli Jews have always favored a two-state solution that grants self-determination to the Palestinians. They just can't get their way because of this nutcase zealot minority.
We within the religious faiths
so
also have to fight.
There has to be a civil war within Judaism, if you like, and there is one going on in Islam very clearly, and they're trying to, the fascist side wants to, they want to export that war to where we live to try try and win it. So they've really involved us in their war. And it's not my province, Andrew, but the Christian churches can't seem to make up their mind whether we are fighting for our civilization or not, or whether we should feel guilty about existing.
Hierarchies.
To be continued.
Yes.
Which we had another hour. Andrew Sullivan, Christopher Hitchens, come on back.
Mr. Hitchens, you are likely the world's most charming, roguish, and enlightened atheist, and I love you for that. But as a Sufi Muslim, I'm very ruffled by the title of your book. Of all the titles that you likely had at your disposal, did you have to settle for the literal negation of Allahu Akbar?
Yes. I thought. Thank you for that question. Thank you. Oh, it's a very good question. I'm glad. I wanted to come back to it. Why?
Yeah. As I've said, I think that all religions are wrong in the same way, in that they privilege faith over reason, but they're not all equally bad in the same way all the time. I mean, if I'd been writing in the 1930s, I would certainly have said that the Roman Catholic Church was the most dangerous religion in the world because of its open alliance with fascism and anti-Semitism, which the damage from that our culture has never recovered from and never will. But at the moment it's very clear to me that the most toxic form that religion takes is the Islamic form. The horrible idea of wanting to end up with Sharia, with a religion-governed state, a state of religious law, and that the best means of getting there is jihad, holy war, and that Muslims have a special right to feel aggrieved enough to demand this, I think is absolute obscene wickedness, and I think their religion is nonsense. And
in its
entirety. The idea of God speaks to some illiterate merchant warlord in Arabia, and he's able to write this down perfectly, and it contains the answers to all human. Don't waste my time. It's bullshit.
But you're saying the same about it.
Also, that God speaks. The Archangel Gabriel speaks only Arabic, it seems.
I just want to say, in retrospect, you were very civil, actually. I don't know what I was thinking.
Is this the same characterization of all religions?
Well, actually, no, because remember, Islam makes one special claim for itself. All religions claim to be revealed truth. They all are founded by divine revelation. But Islam rather dangerously says, ours is the last and final one. There can't be any more after this. This is God's last word. Now, that's straight away a temptation to violence and intolerance. And if you note, it's a temptation they seem quite willing to fall for.
Rabbi,
Second,
do you have any
I had another motive. Another motive, which is this. If you remember Dick Gregory, the older comrades here will, great black comedian and civil rights activist, when he came to write his memoir, he called it nigger.
Right.
It upset a lot of people, including his old mum, who called him and said, "Why are you doing this?" And he says, "Mama, every time you hear that word again, they're selling my book." So every Allahu Akbar reminds people that we're in a very serious struggle with a very depraved religion. And that help is available.
Friend, you give no quarter?
Look, he believes in the prophecy of Muhammad. I'm sorry to say, I think he's been, at best, conned. Yeah.
Our time is ticking down.
Look, my one question is basically, or my one comment, or passing comment, is that so many times you've brought up women in Islam. I'd just like to correct that I've read the Quran, and all Muslim scholars would agree with me that Islam gives women a lot of rights. We over and over give women in Islam through the Quran. I may not say it through individuals who preach the religion, but Islam through the Quran gives women a lot of rights, and I need that to be heard. I need that to everyone to understand and hear that. I mean, I am a young Muslim woman myself. I sit before you, I have a voice, and I can speak to you, and I can look you in the eye, and I do have my rights. And when I go to Iran, I'm actually Iranian as well, so when I go to Iran, I also have my rights. I need it to be heard that the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us our rights. Individuals in countries and people who represent our religion may not, and they may do the wrong thing to sort of stand in front and show us religion and preach us religion, but Islam does.
All right, we're going to take that as a comment, a very passionate one at that. Okay.
Well, no. No, we're not. No, we're not going to take it as a comment. I can see your face, I can see your hair, and I can see you sitting in an audience with young gentlemen. Don't you tell me you can do any of that in Iran.
I can, though.
No, you can't.
Yes, I can.
No, you cannot.
I can. In Iran, in the Islamic Republic of Iran, where I have been, my hair would be out. My hair would be out because my veil would be little. My hair would be, it may be covered a little bit, but just like in the Bible, in the letter to the Corinthians, it says to cover your head, to be modest.
It's a shame she spoiled what could have been a perfectly good statement.
All right, okay, I'm sorry.
my
sorry.
modesty would be there. I mean, you've been talking about these cheap jokes
you
and
say
things
you
throughout
have-
this
if-
whole
if you say
conversation,
that
but you're the only one
You
making
insult,
the cheap
you
comments.
insult your sisters in Tehran who are being beaten,
Astaghfirullah,
who are being beaten and raped every day when you say that they have their rights in the Islamic Republic.
Sisters. I do not insult
It's an
my
insult to the women of Iran.
I do not. Astaghfirullah.
Okay, okay.
Now, let's not dance around. Not all monotheisms are exactly the same at the moment. They're all based on the same illusion. They're all plagiarisms of each other. But there's one in particular that at the moment is posing a serious menace, not just to freedom of speech and freedom of expression, but to quite a lot of other freedoms too. And this is the religion that exhibits the horrible trio of self-hatred, self-righteousness, and self-pity. I'm talking about militant Islam. Globally, it's a gigantic power. Globally, it's a gigantic power. It controls an enormous amount of oil wealth, several large countries and states, with an enormous fortune. It's pumping the ideology of Wahhabism and Salafism around the world, poisoning societies where it goes, ruining the minds of children, stultifying the young in its madrasas, training people in violence, making a cult of death and suicide and murder. That's what it does globally. It's quite strong. In our societies, it poses as a cringing minority whose faith you might offend, and which deserves all the protection that a small and vulnerable group might need. Now, it makes quite large claims for itself, doesn't it? It says it's the final revelation. It says that God spoke to one illiterate businessman in the Arabian Peninsula 3 times through an archangel, and that the resulting material, which as you can see when you read it, is largely plagiarized from the Old and the New Testament, almost all of it actually plagiarized ineptly from the Old and New Testament, is to be accepted as a divine revelation and as the final and unalterable one, and that those who do not accept this revelation are fit to be treated as cattle, infidels, potential chattel, slaves, and victims. Well, I tell you what, I don't think Muhammad ever heard those voices. I don't believe it. And the likelihood that I'm right, as opposed to the likelihood that a shepherd who couldn't, a businessman who couldn't read, had bits of the Old and New Testament redictated to him by an archangel, I think puts me much more near the position of being objectively correct. But who is the one under threat? The person who promulgates this and says, I'd better listen because if I don't, I'm in danger? Or me, who says, oh, no, I think this is so silly you could even publish a cartoon about it. And up go the placards, and up go the yells and the howls and the screams. Behead those. This is in London. This is in Toronto. This is in New York. It's right in our midst now. Behead those who cartoon Islam. Do they get arrested for hate speech? No. Might I get in trouble for saying what I've just said about the Prophet Muhammad? Yes, I might. Where are your priorities, ladies and gentlemen? You're giving away what's most precious in your own society, and you're giving it away without a fight, and you're even praising the people who want to deny you the right to resist it. Shame on you while you do this. Make the best use of the time you've got left. This is really serious. Now, if you look anywhere you like, because we've had invocations of a rather drivelling and sickly kind tonight of our sympathy. What about the poor fags? What about the poor Jews, the wretched women who can't take the abuse, and the slaves and their descendants, and the tribes who didn't make it and were told that their land was forfeit? Look anywhere you like for the warrant for slavery, for the subjection of women as chattel, for the burning and flogging of homosexuals, for ethnic cleansing, for anti-Semitism, for all of this. You look no further than a famous book that's on every pulpit in this city and in every synagogue and in every mosque. And then just see whether you can square the fact that the force that is the main source of hatred is also the main caller for censorship. And when you've realized that you're therefore this evening faced with a gigantic false antithesis, I hope that still won't stop you from giving the motion before you the resounding endorsement that it deserves. Thanks awfully. Night night. Stay cool. In Britain should be allowed to wear not the chador or the just the scarf, the headscarf, but the all-enveloping, the veil which only allows a slit of this kind. And Well, we should allow it because it's Islamic, and because the Quran calls for women to cover their head. Now, the Quran doesn't call for women to cover their head. There's no such call in the Quran. There is probably only one society in the region, now that the Taliban has been removed, namely Saudi Arabia, which calls for women to have their faces covered. If you went out like that in Turkey or in Tunisia, for example, you would actually be arrested. You're not allowed to do it in Muslim societies of this kind. Yet in London, it's considered that the most extreme must be the norm, lest we be accused of being insensitive to Muslims. This is the way the ratchet gets turned. An elected member of the Netherlands Parliament, a man called Geert Wilders, was recently arrested and deported at London Airport and sent back to Amsterdam because he'd made a film criticizing the Islamization of Holland, which is being a campaign of violence, including the murder of Theo van Gogh, the descendant of the great painter who'd made a film about the oppression of Muslim women in Amsterdam. Our Archbishop of Canterbury, Dr. Rowan Williams, the man who does an almost perfect imitation of a sheep in human form. An early objection of mine to Christianity when I was at school was being told that I was a member of a flock. I don't know how you chaps and chapesses feel about this. I always felt flock was a bit much, although I know some people of whom it could be said. But shepherd, look, we know shepherds don't look after sheep just because they like them, okay? They either want to or fleece them or eat them. The whole thing has always seemed to be a terrible, you'll forgive the expression, I hope, but that one has to come out with it. That's how Rowan Williams is to me. And he says that he thinks that the United Kingdom should have Sharia law for Muslims. No Muslim had demanded this. No Muslim imam had yet felt strong enough to dare demand that there be Sharia law in Britain. But the Archbishop of Canterbury says, well, let's make nice. Let's give it to them before they ask for it. Let's cry before we're hurt. Let's concede before it's even been demanded. This is a civilizational question to me, and it must be resisted.
And I actually, when I arrived in Atlanta, I turned on the TV, CNN, and the first person I saw was actually Christopher. And I was very alarmed, not at what he was saying, but at what he was speaking against, and that was the notion that there was a serious motion before the United Nations that saying anything critical of Islam would be criminalized. And that's the end of free speech, and it's very dangerous. Well, perhaps you want to comment on that, because I think you're probably much more astute observer of it than I am.
The United Nations non-binding, so far non-binding resolution, which is carried now for 3 years, and was carried again this week, sponsored by Pakistan, a country for which we pay. It isn't really even a country, barely even a state. It's a construct of Muslim partitionism carved out of the body of India. It wants to tell us what we can say and what we can think in our own country. And it says that we mustn't ever use the word Islam in any sentence that includes the words violation of human rights, for example. Now this is in the week when the government of Pakistan has handed over to the Taliban its most fertile valley, this valley of Swat, 100 miles from the capital, Islamabad, and said, you can run this valley, militarily and legally. You can have Sharia law, and you are the police and the enforcers of it. And you can close all the girls' schools. But we can't say that your religion is anything to do with the violation of human rights. It's preposterous. Your point about the one-way street is very well made, if I may say so. There are madrasas within 50 miles of where I live in Washington, in Virginia. There are Saudi paid-for schools that preach violent anti-Semitism, hatred of the Shia Muslims. Remember, don't ever forget, they hate other Muslims too. Of Hindus, of Christians and Crusaders, and of course of atheists. So they've got me, 3 times, I suppose, in this field of fire. And don't worry, it's coming to a place near you. The Qurans that are given out in our prison system to Muslim prisoners by Muslim chaplains, paid for by Saudi Arabia, are Qurans written to the Wahhabi tune. They're not just your everyday Quran, they're the Qurans that the Wahhabis want you to read, containing direct incitement. They've been given out with taxpayers' money in the prison system. Militias are forming. Next you'll have militias of this kind with their own chaplains within the United States Armed Forces. Are you ready for that? Are you ready to have Wahhabi preachers in the US Armed Forces? You better get ready for it, unless you're going to take the James Madison view that there shouldn't be any chaplains in the US Armed Forces to begin with, or in the prison system. People want to pray, you can't stop them. But we cannot have state-subsidized prayer. We cannot have state-subsidized preachers or chaplains. Give it up, or give it to your deadliest enemy and pay for the rope that will choke you. This is very urgent business, ladies and gentlemen, I beseech you. Resist it while you still can, and before the right to complain is taken away from you, which will be the next thing. You will be told you can't complain because you're Islamophobic. The term is already being introduced into the culture as if it was an accusation of race hatred, for example, or bigotry, whereas it's only the objection to the preachings of a very extreme and absolutist religion. Watch out for these symptoms. They are not just symptoms of surrender, very often ecumenically offered to you by men of God in other robes, Christian and Jewish and smarmy ecumenical. These are the ones who will hold open the gates for the barbarians. The barbarians never take a city till someone holds the gates open for them. And it's your own preachers who will do it for you, and your own multicultural authorities who will do it for you. Resist it while you can. And if you wonder what will happen if you don't, look and see how a cricket team in Middlesex in England had to change its name by force last week, because it was called, and had been for years, the Middlesex Crusaders. Look and see how stories about little pigs can't be taught to children in English schools anymore, lest offense be taken by the religion of peace. Resist it while you can. It's funny how the fish rots from the head. I mean, we mentioned the Archbishop of Canterbury caving in on Sharia. The Prince of Wales, the chinless, bat-eared elder son of Her Majesty the Queen, a man with no taste in women as far as I can see. His whole job is waiting for his mother to die. Will, when Her Majesty's heart ceases to beat, will at that instant become head of the state, head of the armed forces, and head of the church.
Of faiths.
This is what you get if you found the national church on the family values of Henry VIII.
But it's not
As
only
we did,
that.
and he says that he wants to be not just head of the Church of England, but head of all faiths. Country, and with King Fahd of Saudi Arabia has built a gigantic Wahhabi madrasa mosque in North London, where were housed the man in whose honor you have to take off your shoes every time you go to the airport, Richard Reed, well-known overnight guest there. There were housed four, I think, of the 9/11 hijackers. A pest house in the middle of London, paid for by Saudi money, and enjoying the patronage of His Royal Highness Prince Charles. It's a trahison, a very high-level trahison by those whose responsibility it is to safeguard and to uphold what we used to think were the same values. They've sold them out in an attempt to show how friendly to Islam they can be.
Jerry Falwell and Pat Robertson, two guys whose political weight, I think, has for 25 years now been grossly overestimated, who never quite do produce the voters and the punch that they claim to have. But let's remember, these are the two men who said that the World Trade Center was the deserved punishment that America had earned for itself, for its so many iniquities. It was they who parroted the line of Professor Chomsky that the United States had this coming. These men prefer any theocracy to any kind of democracy. Of course they are our common enemy, but if I want to go and make war, and don't kid about it, I'm perfectly willing to use force with these guys if they even threaten it with us. More than willing. Would rather welcome the chance, actually, to do it. I'm going to have a thin time doing it if my allies on the left are making excuses for Islamic jihad all the while, and discrediting their own democracy and isolating themselves within civil society. The fact of the matter is that you either oppose religious dictatorship and its terrorist surrogates everywhere, without distinction, whether it's messianic settlers on the West Bank or Christian nutbags trying to teach us that we trod the earth at the same time as the dinosaurs, or the forces of jihad. You either oppose this kind of thing root and branch, or you don't. And I'm sorry to say that the anti-war left has failed the test. It has made excuses for our totalitarian and theocratic enemies. It has said that Mr. bin Laden is the ventriloquist of long-forgotten Muslim grievances. Yes, he is. Yes, he is. I'll tell you what the grievances are. The grievance of seeing an undraped female face. The grievance of having a Christian or a Jew or a non-believer living on your soil that you claim is Muslim soil. the horror of having lost the Islamic Caliphate, the empire you want back. These are not anti-imperialists. They're people who want back a lost empire. The people who blew up harmless partygoers in Bali because Australia had helped to liberate East Timor from Indonesian oppression, and East Timor is a Christian population and Indonesia is Muslim. High on the list of bin Laden's grievances, the outrage of our help for East Timor. Yes, they have grievances, yeah, but it's nothing to the grievance we have with them. And it should be we who they are afraid of. It should be our opinion that they are made to care about. We should make it known to them that we too have unalterable values, that yes, we do care about the Enlightenment, and we do care about the defense of our values and institutions under any government.
2 minutes.
Under any government, and that failing to say this is apologetics and possibly worse, and nothing in what Michael said, it seems to me, would prepare you in any sense for the importance of the struggle